Happy New Year, team players! So, last year I did quite a few videos covering the cleric, from cleric feats to tips for clerics to divine spells. But it's time for me to show my work with today's teamwork belts. It's time for the Divine Defender. Let's dive in. For today's ancestry, we're going to be going with the Elemental Heart Dwarf. This allows us to choose acid, cold, electricity, or fire damage. We can do a good amount of damage of that type to all adjacent creatures once per day. This build is going to use harming font, and sometimes we're going to be going up against undead. So we need a way to do good damage to them. Plus, if we get surrounded by enemies, this is a good way to hit them all without harming our allies, as we won't be able to take selective energy for a good while yet. And of course, our class is going to be the War Priest Cleric. We are trying to be a tank cleric here, so Cloistered Cleric will not work, absolutely not. But don't worry, my next build will be for a Cloistered Cleric. In the meantime though, for our deity, we're going to want to go with Anubis, as that's one of the only deities that allows us to have a harmful font and have the favored weapon that we want, which is a flail. A flail is a martial weapon, which means we won't get deadly simplicity, but we will still get our ancestry feats. And we're going to go with Unburdened Iron. This means we aren't slowed down by our armor, and if we were to be slowed down by something else, we will reduce that penalty by 5 feet. By the end of this, we're going to be a very fast tank. I know that sounds weird because tanks are usually pretty slow, but yeah, we're going to have a speed of 30 feet as a tank, which is kind of insane. If you want to know how we're going to do that as a dwarf, then you're just going to have to watch the entire video. Anyway, the starting stats for this build should be Strength 3, Dexterity 0, Constitution 2, Intelligence 0, Wisdom 4, and Charisma 0. And level 2, we'll be taking War Priest Armor. This gives us training in heavy armor, and then later expert in it, which allows us to tank much more hits, which is very important for this build. And for our free archetype, we're going to be taking the Hell Knight Armiger dedication. This will give us access to the Hell Knight dedication, which we'll take later, and resistance to mental damage. It also gives us training in Intimidation and Hellmore, but the training in Intimidation isn't hugely important. Hellmore might be useful though. At level 3, of course we gotta talk about general feats. And if you've been with the channel for a long time, you know the 3 feats I always take, pretty much. Toughness, Die Hard, and Canny Acumen, this time for our reflex saves. But we're also going to need Fleet and Incredible Initiative. Fleet is, of course, how we get to 25 feet with this build. We'll talk about how we get the other 5 feet that we need for 30 feet later in this video. And of course, Incredible Initiative is just so that we can get right into combat rather quickly. Moving on to level 4, we'll be taking Channel Smite. We'll talk more about this in the teamwork reports. And for the free archetype, we're going to be taking Mortification. This allows us to choose bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. We gain resistance to that type of damage equal to the number of Hell Knight Armiger and other Hell Knight feats we have, which right now is 2. And by the end of this build, we're going to have resistance 10 to that type of damage. It really doesn't matter which type of physical damage you pick here. They're all going to be good in some way. If I were you, though, I would pick Piercing, because Piercing is what most ranged weapons do. For our level 5 Ancestry feat, we're going to be going with Dwarven Reinforcements. This feat is going to make crafting a very important feat for this build because of our shield. With this feat, we can add a bonus to our shield's hardness. And we're going to want to be trained in crafting anyway, so we can repair our shield as well. It does take an hour to use this feat, but it lasts all day. So definitely worth it. For Teamwork Report number 1, we are a tank. that means we need some reason for enemies to come after us instead of our allies. That's where our energy emanation and our channel smite come into play. Both of those allow us to do massive damage to enemies. Thus, we are a threat. And enemies generally like to go after threats. Granted, our accuracy isn't great at this level. But that's part of the reason why we're a war priest, because eventually we are going to get mastered in our weapon, which means our accuracy will go up. But it's going to be quite a while before that happens. We also need to be able to take hits, but we do have resistance to mental damage as well as one type of physical damage. For other types of damage, we are going to have to rely on spellcasters in our party. But as a War Priest cleric with War Priest armor, we can wear heavy armor. And we're not slowed down by it thanks to Unburdened Iron. In addition, we do have these shield block feats, which means we can take even less damage when we have our shield raised. And don't forget that we need crafting for this build so that we can repair our shield and give it more hardness if we have an hour to spare. We might even want to take the quick repair skill feat so we can repair our shield quickly. Overall though, you're just going to treat this like any other tank, just with spellcasting. Okay, at level 6 we'll take Cast Down so we can knock enemies prone with our harm spells. We're also going to need Diabolic Certitude so we get a free recall knowledge check against a devil we're observing. Also, if we roll a critical failure, we get a failure instead. Level 8 is when we'll finally take our selective energy feed, so we can do a 3-action harm without hitting our allies. Then we will be taking the Hell Knight dedication, but only for our prerequisites. What this feat gives us isn't hugely important. We do need to be part of the Order of the Chain Hell Knights. It will become apparent why a bit later. For our level 9 Ancestry feat, we're going to be taking Energy Blessed. This allows us to do even more damage with our energy emanation. And we can make the emanation a 5, 10, or 15 foot emanation. It's still only a once per day thing, but at least it does extra damage. For level 10, we're going to be taking Replenishment of War. So whenever we damage a foe with our flail, which is our deity's favorite weapon, we gain temporary hit points. Granted, they only last one round, but at least we can get some healing going on without needing heal spells prepared. And the reason we need the Hell Knight dedication is because of order training. We need the Order of the Chain because of the benefits of it, the lesser of which we get with this feat. So we can make a melee strike, and if we hit, we can attempt to grapple the target. If we're wielding our flail, then we can ignore grapple's requirement that we have a hand free. We also don't increase our multiple attack penalty until after we've made both attacks. So even though we're wielding a shield and a weapon, and we're not using a weapon that has the grapple trait, we can still grapple people. At level 12, we'll be taking Shared Replenishment, allowing us to give temporary hit points to one of our allies instead of ourselves. We're also going to need Ardent Armiger, giving us a bonus on saving throws against mental effects that specifically improve our attitude. We also get this bonus to will DCs against certain charisma-based actions. At level 13, we'll be taking Mountain Stoutness for even more hit points. Then we're going to need Channeling Block. This is for when we're really low on hit points and we have harm spells left. This effectively allows us to add the damage we would do with our harm spell to our shield's hardness. Thus, this is an excellent way of taking little to no damage when we shield block. Then we can finally take Armiger's Mobility. We had to wait till this point to take it because it requires us to be expert in heavy armor, which we didn't get until last level. Normally, this would remove the speed penalty from our heavy armor. However, since we're a dwarf with the Unburdened Iron feat, this actually increases our speed by 5 feet. Hence why we have a speed of 30 feet, which again is pretty nuts. At level 16, we'll be taking Rebounding Smite. This means that if we miss with Channel Smite, we can still do our harm damage to a different enemy, as long as they're within range. We're also going to need advanced order training for, of course, the order of the chain. This means that if we roll a critical failure on a grapple check, we get a failure instead. In addition, if we have a foe grabbed and they try to escape, if they roll a failure, they get a critical failure instead, and if they get a critical success, they get a success instead. Meaning, if they escape from our grapple, they always have to use another action to step out of your range if they want to, making grapple that much better. For our last ancestry feat, we're going to be taking Hero's Call. This gives us heroism as a 3rd level divine innate spell once per day. In addition, if we cast the spell while we have half or fewer hit points, we gain temporary hit points equal to twice our level. At 18th level, we have Inviolable, so enemies take spirit damage every time they attack us. And we're also going to need Hell Knight Order Cross Training. This gives us the Domain Initiate Cleric feats, and we want to choose Protection for that, as that will allow us to take damage for our allies. For level 20, we're going to be taking Avatar's Protection. This allows us to cast Avatar as a reaction if we have it prepared. And our final feat for this build is going to be Advanced Order Training for the Order of the God Claw. This allows us to cast the 3-action version of Heal, heightened up to a rank that is 1 level lower than your highest rank. You can also select up to 4 creatures in the area to not be affected by the spell. But most importantly, you can use this ability to bring back a creature within 30 feet that has died. If you do, then that creature is restored to 1 hit point and is doomed to 1 for 24 hours. For Teamwork Report number 2, in regards to our last 2 free archetype feats, some GMs might not allow you to take the Order of the God Claw because we're not worshipping one of the deities that are part of the 5. If that's the case, you can pretty much pick any order you want there. I personally would allow you to do it because a lawful neutral deity like Anubis would probably let you at least come close to worshipping another deity, as long as they are your main deity. You would still probably have to follow the anathema of the 5. But I know some GMs wouldn't let you do that. So if you can't pick Order of the God Claw, pick something else. And of course, you are going to want to trip people with your harm spells when you can. Unfortunately, Cast Down does not work with Channel Smite. You need to immediately cast the harm spell. But that's another reason why we need the Order of the Chain. Because number 1, it's not always going to be prudent to trip every foe. So grappling is going to be an option. And remember that we don't need a free hand to do it because we are using a flail. If you don't have free archetype, then you're still going to be a good tank. It's just grappling won't really be an option because you won't have a hand free. And you won't be as fast because you won't be able to take Armiger's mobility. You also won't get that great resistance. But you're still going to be able to take hits, and you're still going to be a threat. Which means you don't really need free archetype for this build, but if you have it, it's great to have. And that's going to do it for this build. If you guys enjoyed this build, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 2e teamwork content. You can also check out the links in the description below for my Patreon page, as well as my Discord and other social media. If you want useful spells for any cleric build, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.